Welcome to my PHP Serverless Project Updates podcast with your host, Bob Bloom, a production of South LaSalle. Welcome to the second episode of my brand new PHP Serverless Project Update podcast. AI has not made my Lambda+PHP FOSS project obsolete, but it is changing its character. Today is Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. My PHP Serverless Project Update podcast is my show to update you on what is happening with my PHP Serverless project. Episodes are published periodically with a baseline target for at least once per month. This is your podcast host, Bob Bloom. It is with deep gratitude that I express my thanks to my intrepid sponsors of my PHP Serverless project, of which this podcast is a part of, Toga Aircan and Lugalia. You can listen to this podcast on my website, via RSS, on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, none of which, except my website, is set up right now because my first two episodes will be in my very first RSS feed, with which I will use to set them up on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. I have been wondering if AI has made my Lambda+PHP FOSS project obsolete. I was looking at AWS's May 29th announcement of new MCP servers for serverless and containers, and quoting from that announcement, these MCP servers give AI code assistants real-time contextual understanding of Lambda and other Amazon services. Devs can use natural language to describe their requirements while AI code assistants handle service configurations, infrastructure setup, and cross-service integrations. The code assistant will use the tools and configurations provided in the MCP server to build and deploy apps. MCP servers also simplify operations by enabling AI-assisted service-specific configuration of logging, monitoring, security controls, and troubleshooting failures. I'm thinking another CDK front end. But anyways, the fundamental deliverable of my Lambda+PHP FOSS project is teaching PHP devs how to cook up their own PHP runtimes for Lambda. And my first reaction to this announcement, well, who the heck needs me anymore? Now you could just prompt Visual Code Studio to do what you want to do in Lambda. And then I thought, wait, hold on. Not so fast. Even if my project is obsolete right now, there's value in going through the process of building the PHP runtimes for Lambda using AI and the MCP servers, seeing how they do, and then to keep my eyes on these things. Furthermore, it would be interesting to see what's going on with the other platforms. I mean, if AI has rendered my Lambda+PHP FOSS project obsolete, then someone in our PHP community should have eyes on what's going on. I would be that someone. And then I thought, PHP's not a Lambda native language, so the MCP servers are not going to have first-party AWS docs on using PHP with Lambda. Well, except for the real, and I'm not shitting you here, PHP references that actually exist in the first-party AWS documentation site that reference PHP. They actually reference Bref. But in terms of building your own PHP runtime for Lambda, let's just assume that Copilot or any of the other LLMs can do this. But what would they be trained on? What's out there? Well, what's out there are variations of that very important 2018 AWS Compute blog post listing the handler source code in PHP. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in going through this exercise to see what it's like doing a Hello World PHP Lambda with the LLMs. My guess is that my wanting to treat the handler as part of feature code is going to be something new for the LLMs. And then I did something that bothered me But I started thinking of the LLMs as my primary audience and not the PHP community. My logic is that our amazing PHP community will use the fruits of my labors by way of AI, instead of by reading my docs directly, instead of by reading my source code directly. The community will use what the LLMs ingest. So I started looking into, how do you write content in a way that the LLMs will want to ingest my content and use that as the authoritative answer? And then how do you structure the docs to be ingestible by the LLM? So I don't think my project is obsolete, but I think the character has changed. I decided to buy the domain cookingruntimes.com for my Lambda+PHP FOSS project because I described my project as cooking up runtimes. Now, I did not say Lambda in the domain because I don't want any quarrel with trillion-dollar companies, and it leaves my domain open to doing other platforms. Now, I set up a front-end website and a back-end website. It took me a couple of tries to figure out what scaffolding I really wanted, which ended up being a Greenfield Laravel install, but very stripped down. I really stripped it down. I'm starting minimal and then seeing what I need. And just as with my LaSalle software, my apps are very bare. My feature code will be in packages. And I have one package for the front end. I have two packages. They're just skeletons right now, but they're set up for my back end. One of the back end is a generalized AWS package for the plumbing that will make extensive use of the AWS PHP SDK, which will be perhaps pretty good for me to use somewhere else. Be amazing if somebody actually used that. But anyways, the other backend package is my AWS runtime stuff. So I still have my proof of concept website, and I have assorted source code and database stuff. I think I'm going to try a full cycle basic runtime to start. I've not settled on how I want the front end site to look like. But I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be using AI at some point. I have too many questions that I need to answer before I open up an AI chat window. Thank you for listening to my second episode of my PHP serverless project update podcast entitled AI has not made my Lambda+PHP FOSS project obsolete, but it's changing its character. You have been listening to a South LaSalle production. Opinions expressed are not necessarily those of South LaSalle, Bob Bloom, nor of the organizations represented. Links and materials discussed on air are available in the show notes for this show. Information contained herein have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but are not guaranteed. Podcasts are released under copyright. Rights are reserved. Email correspondence to the attention of Bob Bloom at bob.bloom@lasallesoftware.ca.